welcome everyone back to the Authentic as Fuck podcast. Welcome back, Jelena.
Hello. Nice to see you.
How was your week off?
I tried to be more consistent in making posts,
Mhm.
and one person even approached me, one young guy that is in marketing, and he wanted to offer his help and make some to help me make some content.
Mhm.
So far that was interesting because it's so good to see other people's perspective, because I'm under impression how much I'm in silos because of content I consume and people I'm in touch with. So you it's hard to see things out of perspective of person that is not into psychology. So so this is it. We are talking about content,
Mhm.
and I mean, it's really hard for me to make carousel and to be satisfied with that, even though I think I have a good idea, and I make it. I really sit down and I try to make it, but saying something in small number of words is so difficult. So then I give up. And yeah, so I was kind of thinking maybe I should do it in Serbian. Maybe it's going to be easier. So I'm now on that uh,
I think what you should do
crossroad.
is just not give up, because I think the moment where you want to give up is going to happen no matter what. Do you know what I mean? That's the moment you have to fight, and I think that happens in all creative endeavors. Like anytime you're trying to create anything, like for me, that happens on every project I work on. There's always like a moment in that project where I want to give up,
Mhm.
like where I feel like this is not working. It's not gonna work. Do you understand what I mean?
Yeah, I'm thinking more and more that maybe
It's almost
carousels
like
are not my thing because
a rite of passage that you have to go through.
yeah. So I mean, I don't think that these things should be this hard, because for some people it would be hard to sit and talk for 2 or 3 hours and to exchange opinion and to really listen. So this is something that can be challenging, but I am feeling fine while doing that, even though it's hard. But and I enjoy doing that also, even though it's hard. But in this, I don't enjoy at all. It's only torture for me. And even though I posted one carousel and we talked about that before, and we changed things a bit, but I went back to my idea in the first row because it was, I think it was better. What I tried to do, as we talked, didn't work out as good, so I went back. And the moment I posted it, it was like, okay, this disaster is over. It wasn't like, wow, I made it. It was like, it's over and no pleasure, only torture.
That means
So,
it wasn't over.
well, then I mean, right now, like frequency of me finishing something and being fine, like making something over, is 0%. So is less than 1%.
Hmm. Yeah, you're not finishing it. You're just
But I finished it. Do
no, you
you
didn't
don't think I
finish it.
finished it?
You forced it.
So
Like I
okay.
feel in every project it has to follow some sort of rhythm, and there's going to be parts of it that goes more smoothly, and there's parts of it that doesn't, and you have to know how to get through all of them. Otherwise, it's I just feel like that a lot of people just don't have experience with that. If you're like just if you just have a lot of experience creating or working on projects, after a while you kind of get a sense of, okay, now I'm at this phase of the period project. Now I'm at this phase of the project, right? So there's like a phase of the project where it feels like it's like a big opportunity and it's like the potentials are limitless, right? And then there's a point when you start working on it, it feels a little bit more, like reality hits where you're like, okay, this is not going to work the way I imagined it was going to work, right? And then there
Okay.
has to then you have to go through some struggle period where you start, right, and then you start to get it, and then you're gonna go through and then once you feel like you got it, all of a sudden, like, it feels like nothing is happening. It's like it feels like nothing is gonna work, and then in that the complete darkness, you keep struggling at it, and something else happens where a new idea emerges or new something emerges, and once that happens, then you wrap it up, and from that point on, you'll know when it's done, and then you move on to the next project. And like, I have to understand that I'm going to go through all those phases, no matter what project I'm working on. And you know, once you understand that those are phases that you're going to go through, then you're going to keep at it until you finish each one of those phases. Otherwise, you're going to give up every time. And I honestly think that that's why a lot of people give up every time.
Hmm. I mean, of course, people give up when things are hard, but it's too
Well,
simplified.
they're giving up because they don't have enough experience with it. It's like if you cook before and you know that there are certain phases you have to go through in cooking, then it's and if you've done it a lot, you know what to expect, so you don't give up, right? But if you've never cooked before and you don't understand that there are these phases that you have to go through in cooking, then you're gonna give up every time.
Hmm. So, okay, let me give you this idea that I
Hmm.
try to make carousel with, and I asked a few people to tell me their thoughts. So I'm stuck, almost to give up, and I think the idea is good. So
Okay,
the question
tell me
came
your idea.
from, yeah, the question came from when I was thinking about people that tells me, um, I had everything was fine in my childhood. So um, like they had everything that they needed as they were growing up. So, but usually as we work on problems they bring up, naturally it usually connects to some patterns that are created in their childhood. So there were some misattunements with their parents usually, and some decisions they made so now with themselves in adult life. So 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 I was so there is a metaphor. So imagine you're very thirsty and you need some water, and a person is bringing you a glass of fresh cold water. So but just before they give it to you, they spit in your glass. So you actually needed that water, and even though they obviously are shocked because of what happened, and even though that water still is like 99% fresh, cold, and it will help you to fulfill your needs, it's hard to take it as that. So the thing is, even good things, so majority of our things were good, but if somebody maybe yelled at us or humiliated us here and there, or there were tension around us, or we weren't allowed to show some needs or feel some emotions, this will also influence how we can take good things.
Hmm.
So, and that's when, so the point is not to have this black or white thinking, everything was good or everything was bad. But if you want to understand yourself, you need to go a little bit deeper to understand complexities of your experience.
It sounds good. I guess in there, what you're trying to do is, um, so what I'm thinking there is when I listen to that, the
Hmm.
one main myth that you're trying to break is that not all experiences are all positive or all negative, right?
Yeah, we can say it
So
like
then,
that. Or maybe
mhm,
objective and subjective reality. If something is objectively good, doesn't mean that it's subjectively good.
yeah. So what you're gonna have to do is, if you really want to, because like what do I always say? Like you have to focus on the audience, right?
Yeah.
So what you really have to do is you have to think about somebody who really don't think this way. So they believe that there's like a objectively good thing that happened. So there's no like anything negative about it, or something negative that happened. There's nothing good about it, right? So
Hmm.
somebody who thinks that way, now you have to come up with like one example that will completely break them of that thinking, right? So for me, like if I were to tell this story to somebody, what I would try to do is I would try to find an example where they can't possibly argue with me that I'm wrong.
Hmm.
Do you understand what I mean? So now you need to come up with an example. Like give me an example of an event that happened to me where it wasn't bad. It wasn't all bad, or it wasn't all good. But I would assume that it's all bad or it's all good. Do you understand what I mean?
Okay. You know, I'm
Yeah,
thinking about.
I haven't personally experienced what you said, so that's why it's hard for me to come up with an example. Like it almost has to hit me like, oh yeah, I know exactly what you mean.
Okay. Um.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. I'm thinking about parents that are like they call them helicopter parents. Parents that are everywhere about everything is about their child, and they dedicate their life to their children, and
Hmm.
a lot of attention, and so they dedicated their life. And so, for example, their daughter goes out, and they want to come late, and their parent cannot sleep because they are waiting for them to come back. And when they come back, it's fine, but then they say, oh, I didn't sleep last night, oh, I was so
Hmm.
tired. But this is what parenting takes. So so they show they're dedicated, but it's also send double message, a little bit of guilt inside of the child, because next time when they need to go out, they will think about, oh, she's going to wait for me. And even though I say don't wait for me, they will wait for me. And they say, no, yours to go out, I will wait. And then they will complain that, oh, I'm so tired. So this shows like this looks like a dedicated parent that is there for their kid. They care for them
Hmm.
a lot, but it's also this also brings a lot of responsibility and emotional kind of blackmail that is so hidden
Yeah.
and you cannot pinpoint
But you think most people would agree with that?
with emotional
With that example?
blackmail. I mean, this probably depends from the culture as well, because in some cultures
Yeah.
it's
Yeah,
not
so,
like
so I
that.
would just come up with an example that people cannot possibly not agree with. Do you know what I mean?
Hmm.
So I
You
think
know
that's
when
a
they
good example. It's just not as strong of an example.
is it common in your place for parents to say, I will do everything yours just to study? So then parents think that if they do everything and they this is another example of like emotional blackmail. where parents are advising their children, so just take care of their school, I will take care of everything else. And then this puts this emotional burden on children that they're not allowed to have bad marks, for example, or not to care about
I
school.
understand what you mean, but it's one of those things. Like, I guess what I'm trying to say is you keep trying to come up with the examples within your field, right? And you keep doing that.
Okay,
What's going to
okay.
happen is people are just going to listen to it and be like, "Is that true, or is that like?" I would imagine that by the time they know that example, those are people that don't even need this message to begin with. The type of people that really needs to hear this message are the ones that don't understand those
I see.
examples. Wouldn't you say? Do you understand me? So, like, for those people, like, this is why the audience is so important, because, like, who am I speaking to with this message, right? And like, I can preach to the choir, right, about, you know, these these emotional burdens or whatever it is, right? Emotional baggage. And but then I'm speaking to the choir, like, I'm preaching to the choir. These are people who already understand all of that. I feel like the
Yeah.
for in order for the message to be powerful, I have to be speaking to the people who didn't think this way before, right? And
Okay.
in
So
order to speak to that people, I need a much more obvious example.
okay. So metaphor and example, these are not the same.
I guess metaphor is like an example in a different area.
Okay. What do you think about example with water? Was that a
With
good
what?
example? With water, if you're thirsty and I give you a glass of water.
It was it was a good example, I guess. Now you need to give me a example of that, where, like, how does that happen in real life, like
Okay.
in
Yeah, that's
therapy?
what I
Or
wanted to hear. So metaphor, okay, is not the same. Mm,
I just feel like a good example is the one that you don't even have to explain. Once you say it, people just get it. Do you understand what I mean?
yeah.
And like right now, I'm just trying to think what would be a good example there. Like, what's an example of something that was? Do you understand what I mean? If that's what you're trying to say, or bad intention with good
Hmm.
outcome. I mean, I guess the bad intention is, like, people who go to war together, like, they form a bond,
Hmm.
but the reason why they form the bond is because they're going through, like, trauma, right? Together. So that's like an example of you know how it happens the other way, right? That not all negative experiences are bad. But now you got to find one that works the other way, where not all positive not all positive experiences are bad. Good.
I mean, I'm thinking about, but it's not totally out of. I'm thinking about teachers that are always, on their test, they are emphasizing what was bad. So they are circling and always telling what was bad because their attention is for somebody to correct themselves and to be better.
Hmm.
So they emphasize mistakes, and the outcome is that maybe that child, okay, they know what's wrong, but they also are so insecure and afraid of the teacher because they never know when it's good enough, when they know enough, for example.
Yeah, yeah, that could be a good one too. The examples are something that, like, once you find an example, you're just gonna know that that's the example. It's so obvious that that's the example, that you know that's the moment when like, oh, this is not hopeless, this is not gonna work, but all of a sudden something happens. Like, that's when you find that example.
Hmm.
You know what I mean?
Okay, so now what is hard for me is to, I guess you need to understand what you want to say in so simple words that you can use on other areas of life, because that means that you really understood. You could simplify something that is complex. Probably that's part of the problem, because I don't want to simplify it that much.
I guess it's not really simplifying it. I mean, that like a lot of people like to think that it's that I don't want to simplify this too much, but a lot of times it's like when it's simple, it's also the right answer too.
Yeah.
That's what people don't get. It's just that it's not that it's just simple. It's simple and it also perfect. It's like a perfect piece of the puzzle too, right? And that's why it works.
I mean, when it works. So,
Yeah, I'm trying to think of one right now for this
yeah.
example. Like I'm sure I've heard of something similar to it before.
I mean, you can have an example when somebody wants to help you with some things, to carry your things, and then they
Hmm.
smash your, I don't know, cupboard. They wanted to help you, but they kind of cracked that because they didn't pay attention, and now you have a rupture in your cupboard because somebody wanted to help but made they were clumsy. So,
Yeah, that could be one. Like a good example, I guess, could be like let's say you did something good, right? But you're shy and you don't wanna be like center of attention, right?
mhm.
But somebody else like might be, you know, like putting you in the spotlight, thinking that that's like helping you or something like that. But it's actually like hurting you because maybe, you know, it's that kind of moments are more traumatic for you or something like that. Like that could be one.
Yeah.
But even that I don't know if it's like simple enough, you know. Yeah, I'm gonna have to think of one. I don't know like what like I mean I see it. I can see where the frustration is coming from for you. But the reason
Mhm.
why the reason why the frustration is happening for you is because you're either number one not waiting to have an aha moment, like you're giving up before you have an aha moment, or maybe what you need to do is you need to wait for an aha moment before you start working on the carousel.
When you
Because it
say
seems
aha
like
moment, when you say that I'm giving up before aha moment, what do you mean by aha moment in this context?
it seems like you have like a kind of like a sense of an idea without an aha moment yet, and then
Okay.
you're now trying to force it. And what's going to happen is when you try to force it at that moment, it's going to go just further and further away. It's going to get worse and worse and worse. Like at that moment, it's just better to step away
Mhm.
and work on a different idea until you get an aha moment for that original idea. Like what you haven't had here is sometimes I'll hear a story from you and I'll get an idea immediately. Like I'll have an example immediately. I'm like, oh, that's just like this time when this happens, right? But then there are certain things that you say where I don't get that idea immediately.
Mhm.
And usually what that means is that means I don't know enough about that topic that I need to explore more. Or um yeah, sometimes there's just nothing there yet. I haven't really figured anything out yet. Profound. It feels like I did, but I didn't.
Okay,
Do you
so
understand what I mean?
if we hypothesize that right now, so place where
Hmm.
I am, I got an idea. I thought about this metaphor. I was like, "Ooh, this is good. Let me make something because this remind me of my client and they asked me and this is something that I relate personally. So I have an idea. So and then I made this and I'm frustrated because it feels like I'm trying hard and not going anywhere. And I'm frustrated. I'm giving up. So what is aha moment in here where I need to go if I now pause and name this as time to pause because there is no aha moment? What might be aha moment?
Like aha moment is like an obvious example that'll show me that something you think should have a positive impact actually can have a negative impact in somebody's life.
Mm-hmm. Like it's good if you have a job, but then you can also uh, find yourself being in a bus to way home and double checking your emails because you want to answer all of them even though it's not your working hours. So something obvious like that.
No, it's not obvious. I mean, how is that obvious?
I don't know, it's something that probably people can relate to. Does that make example obvious?
No, like how is that obvious for the problem that we're talking about?
It's not just it came to my mind, like it's a bad example.
I mean, the example that we're trying, like the thing that we're trying to say is so obvious that if any dumbass just heard it, they're gonna be like, "Oh, I never thought of it that way. That's so true." Like it
Mm-hmm.
has to be like that, right? So then now what we need to do is we need to find something that everyone knows is obviously true, but we pretend or we act like it's not. And there's something like that. I guarantee you, there's so many things in our society and in our life which is so obviously true, and I can so obviously easily explain it to you or prove it to you that it's true. But then we pretend like it's not, or we act like it's not, right? So that's what we need to find. And once we find that, that will make people go, "Oh, I never thought of it that way." But in this case, I don't know if we have one yet. You know what I mean? But if it's true, then there is obviously one. Do you understand what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And I think there is. It's just that I haven't seen one that's just like, oh, I never thought of it that way. You know what I mean? So
Mm-hmm.
at this moment, the best thing to do is just walk away, because what will happen is next time you see an example like that, you're gonna be like, oh, that's a good example for this. Do you know what I mean? Rather than trying to
Yeah.
sit there and try to force it.
Okay. I have a thought, but I'm not sure if it will work. You know when banks want to give you a loan for
Hmm.
to buy an apartment, so it sounds so cool and you will only have this amount of money every month to pay back, but you will have this apartment and it sounds very
Hmm.
very well. But then you find yourself like being in your 60s and still paying off that flat. So in the beginning, I don't know, does it have a little bit of that, what we search for?
How?
Because it sounds very good and
I think what the thing that we need to come up with is like something that happened to us that clearly sounds like it's a good thing that happened to us, but it's like it's very very obviously and logically it's not a good thing that happened to us. Do you understand what I mean? And
Okay.
and this is why like um I mean, this is why I think I liked it better when you were talking about something like if I asked somebody for feedback or something like that, and this person told me all the areas that I can improve on or something like that, right? We would think that
Mm-hmm.
that's a positive response, right? That should help me, right? If somebody
Yeah.
gives me feedback, but the reality is when somebody points out all the negative things you've done wrong, that might make you not want to do those things again. So you might not even try it the next time or something like that, right? So
Yeah.
it's actually something that we thought would help us, but ended up hurting us, right? So we have to come up with something like that,
Okay.
kind of like I guess, like some same thing with some medicine, right? Like some sort of painkiller. Like yes, some painkillers are good to relieve your pain, but it can also just make you numb as well and not feel anything.
Mm-hmm.
So you can, so like you need to find that. Now our job is to find an example that is that is very clear to be supposed to be like a medicine, but it's actually like it hurts you, right? Something that's supposed to help you, but it actually hurts you. I mean, I think that's the more important thing. It's not, to me, this idea is not about like how um not all things are all positive or negative, right? Like these events can have both effects on us. Yes,
Mm-hmm.
that's fine, but I feel like that's a very complex topic to get into. If you really want people to understand that, just like a water would spit in it, a lot of these events that happen to us in our lives are both like traumatic and healing at the same time. They're both good and bad at the same time, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's too complex of a topic, in my opinion. I feel like the simpler topic is some people don't understand how a very traumatic event could look like a good thing that happened to you. Do you understand what I mean?
Yeah.
So we need to be able to break their idea that no, this is not a good thing that happened. This is actually a very bad thing that happened, right? So for me, the perfect example will be something like as soon as you hear, we're like, oh my gosh, of course, that's amazing. That's so good. Like affirmative action is a good one, right? And like
Mm-hmm.
affirmative action at a glance seems like it would help us, but the reality is it doesn't, right?
Mm.
And we can explain how easily. And another same thing, like there's a lot of things like that, like participation trophies, right? Like now everybody's getting a trophy. Like we can kind of see how that would be good for the kids, right?
Yeah.
But it's also hurting the kids
Yeah.
at the same time. So you just when you give examples like that, where without even thinking about it, it's like, of course, obviously, it's good. But then if I re-raise if by me rewording the question or something like that, they're like, oh my gosh, no, actually, that's terrible, right? So I have to get both of those effects. Something that's like so obviously true, but it's also obviously so false. So I have to find an example like that.
Mm-hmm.
And once I find an example like that, then that person is gonna be like, oh, I never thought of it that way, right? And that's when they're gonna start to go like, oh, that's true. So it has to be a very, very obvious example, I guess is what I'm trying to say. For example, if somebody, if a kid does a good job and you compliment them on doing a good job, like, how can that possibly hurt that child? You know what I mean? And if I can find if
Yeah.
I can explain how a way how that can hurt that child in a way that whoever is listening to it is like, oh shit, yeah, that's so true. That means the job's done. I don't know if I can think of one right away. Do you understand what I mean when I say find an example?
Mm-hmm. I guess it's not so hard to find an example when you can do the prep for it before the example. I think this is where I struggle the most.
It's because you're too focused on the idea and not the example. Like for me, the idea doesn't matter at all. I don't care what I think. What I don't care what I think. I have some theory that, oh, this happens, then this happens, or this, like, I don't care because everything that I known to be true turned out to be false, right? So I don't care whether this theory is right or this theory is right, or like, I don't really care about that. The only thing I care about is making somebody understand something, right? And in order for me to make somebody understand something, they have to understand it, like, at the core. Do you understand what I mean? So it doesn't matter whether this
No.
person believes in this theory or not. That doesn't really matter to me. What matters to me is whether they believe in this one thing or not, which is the example.
Okay.
Do you understand what I mean? So for me, the
Not
example is it. If I don't have an example, I wouldn't even start working on the carousel. And that's why I keep telling you guys to come to me with an example. Come to me with a myth, truth, and an example. And then let's start from there. I don't care about the myth and the truth until I know what the example is. And like I said, for me, the example is the aha moment. That's the moment where I go, oh, aha, there's a carousel here because there's
mm,
an example here.
okay.
Do
So
you understand what I mean?
yeah. So one
So
stupid question.
if you don't have an example there, that means you can sit there for a year. It's not
Okay.
gonna just appear out of
So
nowhere.
I need your help.
Hmm.
So what there's some example you need to have example of what? How to know what is example and what is not example if you don't have myth and truth.
Because certain things feel like it's true in life, but we don't. We, I don't quite know if it's true or not, right? So, for example, if some sort of an event happens to me, that event in itself is not good or bad, or but how that event affects me could be good or bad depending on. So that feels true to me, but I'm not 100% sure. And even if I was 100% sure, I don't know how to prove it. Do you understand what I mean? So
Okay.
this is gonna be an idea that I have in my head, right? Just like you had that same idea in your head, right? The difference between you and
Okay.
me is now that you have that idea, now you have to force a carousel out of it. Even though you're not sure what that idea is yet, you have to somehow squeeze a carousel out of it and turn it into a myth true sandwich, even though you don't have a myth true sandwich yet. And what I
Okay.
do is when I have the seed of an idea, I don't do anything with it. I just sit with it and I just leave it in the back of my head somewhere. And next time I bump into an example that kind of feels like this, now I save it. And then I see another example, another example. But one day I'm gonna come across an example that's a perfect example for this thing. And
Mm-hmm.
that's the moment my myth true sandwich is born. And what you're trying to do is you're trying to force that to happen, which I'm just telling you is not gonna happen. You're trying to force the
Okay.
connecting
So
the dot to happen rather than letting the dots connect by themselves.
yeah, I'm the fact that something is repeating, it means that I'm doing over and over something that doesn't work. But I'm trying to like diagnose where am I wrong, because obviously if some people when we talk and they kind of stop and think about, oh, something happened, so probably there is something to some conversation that happens, but I am bad at externalizing that and making something out of that. So right now Um, I don't know what is an example and what is not example. Is this an example? So I talked to my dad and he mentioned something about, I don't know if it's like, well, if you have willpower, something like there's a will, there's a way, or if you practice something like about if you do something, it will turns out definitely as a good thing. And I said that it's not, it's too simple to have only that as a factor, because we are different. Our nervous system is different. Imagine an antelope. If she hears a sound, she's like, what's happening? And if you have koala bear and they hear some sound, they're like, whatever. So if you are naturally more observant, it means that you will freak out more and you need to adjust your actions according to your nervous system. So it's not only willpower, it's adjusting your situations according to your nervous system. And he stopped and he thought about that, and it made sense for him. So, how does this sound to you? I think he generally didn't think that if we are more anxious by nature, that that is a relevant thing, that only with enough willpower you can overcome that. But actually, if you force yourself to do things more, like you mentioned, if you force shy person to do something and you want to encourage them, and they're even more traumatized, you actually harm them. So you cannot, I think he thought a little bit about this another dimension, that we are naturally different how we approach
Well, yeah, I
things
mean, we
generally.
need to understand exactly what happened there, because when you say something that makes people go, "I never thought of it that way," what you're essentially doing is you're allowing them to think a little bit differently than they used to, right? Like from a
Yeah.
different perspective or something like that. So so if you break that down, what's happening is every time you say something that'll make people go, "I never thought of it that way." Well, what actually ended up happening is they had this way of thinking
Yeah.
until you presented this other thing, and now they have a different way of thinking, right? And for your dad, it could have been multiple ways, but one of the things is because like even that statement, well, where there's a will, there's a way. Like, what does that mean? Well, like when he said that, what is he trying to say, right? Because sometimes I'll say that, and all I'm trying to say is that if you work hard, like if you post every day, you're gonna grow your Instagram. That's all I'm trying to say, right? Like I'm not trying to say anything
Mm.
profound or deep or anything like that. All I'm trying to say is where there's a way, there's a will, there's a way. The reason why you're not making enough money is because you don't have enough will or the desire to. The reason why you don't have enough followers is because you don't have enough will or desire to. The reason why you're not
Okay.
in a good relationship is because you don't have the will or desire to, right? That's essentially what I'm trying to say, which is true to a certain degree. For 90% of the people out there, the reason why they're not getting the job, the life, the career that they want, and the relationship that they want is because they don't want it bad enough. And because they don't want it bad enough, they're not willing to sacrifice, or they're not willing to put in the work to get it. They're not willing to put in the hours to make the content. They're not willing to put in the hours to do the sales and get clients. They're just not willing to do the things that some other people are willing to do, right? And that's what I'm saying when I say where there's a will, there's a way. So for somebody who's thinking like that, right? So for someone who's thinking like, yeah, it's the reason why this person can't make it is because they're not working hard enough. The reason why they didn't get the good grade is because they're not studying enough. The reason why this person couldn't do it but is because of blah, 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 whatever it is. In my mind, that's what I'm thinking, right? But then if I come to you and I say, no matter how much will I have, I'm still never gonna become the best basketball player in the world, right?
Yeah.
So now what I've done was now that goes against his perspective of thinking, right? Because in his perspective, as long as like we put in the work, you should be able to get the result. But what I did was I just introduced something that no matter how much work I put in, I'm still never going to achieve the result, right? So then that breaks that person's thinking. So you still need to understand, like once you have an example and all of that, you still need to understand what's happening here. Why does this person
Okay.
think this way, and what is the thing that broke
So
that thinking?
okay, so we can
In this
agree
case,
that
for
there was.
example, right? There's two ways you can teach somebody how to swim, right? Like, for example, I can teach somebody to swim by throwing them in the water so they get used to the water, right?
Mhm.
Or I can teach that somebody to swim by making the water sacred, so they can't go in the water until they've learned how to do this, and like it takes them a long time to go in the water, right? For some people, like just throwing in them water is gonna make them traumatized and they never want to go in the water again. For some people, not putting them in the water will make them traumatized because they think they think it's like such a big deal. So not going in the water is what's gonna get them to fear the water, right? So the two completely opposite events can have a completely different outcome on the depending on the person, right? Like if you if you throw somebody just in the water who doesn't know how to swim, that can make that person traumatized. But if you
Mhm.
never put somebody in the water either, because you tell them it's dangerous, that can also make that person traumatized, right? Two completely opposite event. Two Doing two things completely opposite way can have the same effect. Is what I'm trying to say, right? And the reason why that's a good example is because if I tell you like, okay, what's gonna happen if you just throw some kid in the water? They might be traumatized to water, right?
Mhm.
But then what if I also say, what if you tell the kid never to go in the water because and tell them that because your dad died because he drowned, and that kid never goes in the water. That can also make that kid traumatized by water, right? So what's the answer? Put him in the water or don't put him in the water, right? Like if I say like that, that's something that everybody's going to agree with me. They're going to be like, "Oh, that's so true."
Mhm.
Yes, one can give you trauma, and the other one can also give you trauma, even though they're two opposite things. So once I've introduced that topic, something that they agree with, then I've gotten them to think like, "Oh, I never thought of it that way." But what I'm trying to do is, what is something that you already know that I can utilize to prove to you that that's true? Somebody can go through the same event, and one person might be traumatized and one person might not. Ultimately, the only thing you're trying to do with this carousel is prove to people that some sort of a traumatic event could be traumatic or not traumatic. Like the event that happened doesn't matter. It's how that person
Mhm.
processes the event is what I mean. Do you understand what I mean? You're trying to prove to people that events are not naturally traumatic or not, right?
Mhm.
That some positive events can be traumatic and some negative event can be healing. That's what you're trying to prove.
Yeah.
Do you understand what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's all we need to know, really. We don't need to know anything. We don't need to make this carousel any complex than that. The Every time we add on top of this, we're just making it more and more complex and more boring. We need to bring the carousel down to its simplest form, which is what is the one thing that I'm trying to prove? Well, it's simple. It's that this event that looks traumatic could be healing, and this other event that looks healing could actually be traumatic. That's all I'm trying to prove. Am I not right?
Yeah.
So then all I gotta do is find that. All I gotta do is find what is the thing that everybody thinks is healing, but it's actually traumatic. And once I found that, game over. Does that make sense?